After almost 60 years of strong bipartisan support, Congress has cut all federal funding for public media, stripping away a critical pillar of support for local stations like ours. At Vermont Public, we'll lose at least $2 million this year. If all our sustaining members increase their gift by $7 per month, we'll close that gap for good. Increase your gift today and help close the gap at vermontpublic.org/update.
From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Friday, September 26th, and here are today's headlines. A settlement between Vermont regulators and a Middlebury cannabis dispensary could make it easier for stores to advertise their products. The lawsuit filed by Flora Cannabis challenged a number of restrictions implemented by the state's Cannabis Control Board. As part of the agreement, stores would still need board approval for all ads, but they could move forward without it if the board does not rule within 5 days. In-store promotions would no longer require board approval. Stores could also promote on social media so long as no pictures of the products are used. James Pepper chairs the Cannabis Control Board.
Overall, we're going to just decrease the administrative burden for the licensees, and we haven't, kind of opened the floodgates to social media advertising, targeted advertisements towards kids. I think it's a good compromise.
The settlement also calls for a simplified health warning for broadcast cannabis ads. Vermont is getting some much-needed rain this week, but the showers will not bring Vermont out of its current drought conditions, according to Mark Breen. He's senior meteorologist at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium.
We are in a deficit in terms of rainfall that is exceeding 10 inches in many locations. And I think just the math there tells you if we only have 2 inches and we're 10 inches short, we're not going to cut into that deficit quite as much as we'd like to.
Breen says another period of dry weather is coming next week, so water will remain on the short side for another few weeks. Meanwhile, the U.S. Drought Monitor shows all of Vermont is experiencing moderate to extreme drought. Dry conditions are especially severe in central Vermont and the Upper Valley. Wells are drying up in some counties, and rivers are visibly low or running dry. Scientists say Vermont is in both a short or flash drought caused by low rain this summer and a longer-term hydrologic drought caused by a pattern of lower than normal snowfall and rain. A former city employee in Newport who sued the city after he was banned from public property for a year has agreed to settle. Newport paid Andrew Capello $30,000 as part of the settlement. According to the lawsuit, Capello had quit his city job in 2021 after conflict with the city manager and public works director. Capello visited friends and former co-workers at a city park shortly thereafter. While Capello was there, his former boss approached and told him to leave. Capello refused, and a city officer issued a trespass order. Capello argued his constitutional rights were violated. Newport officials wrote in a statement they regretted the events that led to the trespass order. And Champlain College has a new strategic partnership with Philadelphia's Temple University. Officials shared in a press release that starting in summer of 2026, Champlain students will have access to semester-long programs in Japan, Italy, and Spain through Temple's global network. As part of the change, Champlain is sunsetting operations at its Montreal and Dublin campuses at the end of June next year. The two campuses abroad have served thousands of Champlain students for more than 15 years. Coming up, it wasn't supposed to take this long, but after more than 10 years of delays and controversy, the initial phase of a major redevelopment in downtown Burlington is off the starting block. Vermont Public's Liam Mulder-Connors has been covering the so-called pit since its inception, and he'll tell us more about the big step forward for the beleaguered project after this.
Thanks for listening to The Frequency, where support comes from SRH Law, believing that values and mission still matter. When you need good counsel for your values-based work, whether it's securing our energy future, building affordable and sustainable communities, or advancing a values-led economy, they're here to help you make a difference. SRHLaw.com. Making a difference is our practice.
The redevelopment of Burlington's downtown mall, a site known as the Pit, is nearing completion. It comes after more than a decade of delays and turmoil. The first phase of the Burlington Square project is now open. It includes a 161-room hotel and 53 apartments. A second building will have housing and another hotel, and that's slated to open in 2027. Vermont Public's Liam Mulder-Connors has been covering this story for his entire career, And he spoke with Morning Edition host Jen Jarecki about this week's ribbon cutting.
So, Liam, you went to a ribbon cutting yesterday for the opening of the new hotel. Set the scene for us.
There were dozens of people there, including former city officials like Mayor Moreau Weinberger, who'd been in office when the project was first proposed and did a lot to help push it forward. There were past city councilors, including some of the past city council presidents who oversaw a number of development agreements and pre-development agreements over the years. And it was a pretty big celebratory moment. This project has been in the works for a long time and gone through a lot of changes. Here's Dave Farrington, one of the project developers, yesterday.
I'm calling it a monumental milestone. We're not done, but it's a big hurdle that we jumped over.
Now, there is still work to do on the project, but like Farrington said, there's finally something there, which hasn't been the case for a while.
Liam, fair to say you don't normally cover hotel openings. So why were you there?
Well, like you mentioned, I kind of grew up with this project and this story. I've been covering it since I became a reporter here shortly after college. So this really is a story that is near and dear to me. And it has been a project that has gone through so many stops and starts over the years. There have been twists and turns. It was stalled for a very long time. And now there's something there. There's this hotel. There are apartments which are needed in a city that's been struggling with a housing shortage. And there's more housing coming down the pike with the rest of this project. So it's a big deal for the city. And the fact that there's something there is pretty significant.
Will you walk us through a brief history of some of those twists and turns of this redevelopment saga?
Sure. So back in 2014, Don Sinix, who was the owner of the mall at the time, unveiled a sweeping vision where he would expand the mall. There'd be office space, there'd be apartments, and controversially, there was going to be a 14-story tower as part of this new mall redevelopment. That drew a lot of ire from local activists. There were lawsuits that were filed, but the project was able to kind of inch forward still. Those lawsuits didn't completely stop it. And in December 2017, Sinix demolished the mall, knocked it down, and that's where we ended up with this large vacant lot that became known as the Pit, was right there in the middle. And shortly after the demolition, the project stalled and remained stalled for 4 years because Sinix wasn't able to secure financing, and it just didn't go forward. Many other twists and turns happened. Another big developer took the lead, then scaled it back, then abandoned it. Sinix came back, and then a trio of local developers bought it out. And that trio of developers is who restarted construction in 2022. So it's really gone from pit to project, and that's something that the developers have noted. Here's Ash Sangani. He's with the Giri Group, or the Giri Hotels, which is the group running the new hotel.
Just for a retrospect, right? A few years ago, there was a big hole here. Just take a second to just understand where things moved.
So the first phase of the project, now called Burlington Square, is done. So Liam, what happens next?
Well, the new apartments there are being leased. The hotel is open. In terms of the rentals, there's the first tenant is moving in at the end of this week, and according to the developers, 4 of the apartments have been leased. They're pretty expensive. A studio is a little more than $1,600 at the lowest level, and the top floor has a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment that's going for $6,800. And like I said, there's still more work to be done on this project. There's another building that needs to be finished, and that'll have a hotel and more than 300 apartments. There's some street work that needs to get done as well, and all of that is going to take a couple more years still.
That was Vermont Public Reporter Liam Elder-Connor speaking with Morning Edition host Jen Jarecki. And now it's time for our check-in on news from the world of sports. And by the time you're hearing this, the Boston Red Sox may have clinched their first playoff berth in 4 years. That may have come from a combination of Boston winning the series finale against the Blue Jays in Toronto last night combined with a Houston Astros loss, but even if that scenario didn't pan out, the math is very much in favor of the Old Town team finally getting back to playing postseason baseball. The Red Sox reduced their magic number to 2 thanks to back-to-back wins over the slumping Blue Jays this week, with timely hits from players like catcher Carlos Narvaez, who broke out of a slump by belting a 2-run double Tuesday night, followed by a 3-run homer on Wednesday. And starter Garrett Crochet followed up Wednesday with an 8-inning gem that ran his Cy Young caliber record this season to 18-5. The Red Sox are also enjoying the return of Wilyer Abreu after he missed several weeks with an injury, and once he regains his timing at the plate, he should help strengthen an offense that has further been buoyed by Masataka Yoshida. He's been feasting on Toronto pitching with 4 hits over a 2-game span, including a homer on Wednesday night. And even if Abreu isn't quite 100% at the plate yet, he showed off his value defensively Wednesday on one of the rarest plays you'll ever see in baseball, when he threw out Jays catcher Alejandro Kirk at first base on a hit into right field. It was a play that ended the game. Kirk doesn't run very well, and the ball was hit so hard it got to Abreu quickly. But you've still got to have a super strong and accurate arm to throw out a runner at first who's knocked a hit into the outfield, and Abreu did just that, one-hopping a bullet throw to first base. That sent the Blue Jays to their 7th loss in 8 games and dropped them into a tie with the New York Yankees for the AL East Division crown after having as large as a 5-game lead just a week ago. But Toronto's woes are nothing compared to those of the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers had a 15.5-game lead for first place in the AL Central in July. It was still a 10.5-game lead as late as September 1st, but after a 5-1 loss to the polar opposite Cleveland Guardians, who won an astonishing 17 of their last 19 as of Wednesday, the Tigers are now desperately clinging by the skin of their claws just to get into the playoffs as a wild card. Wild indeed. And it's appropriate that the Tigers will finish the regular season against the Red Sox starting at Fenway Park tonight with a 3-game set, because it's my beloved but ill-fated Red Sox team from 1978 that, at least for now, holds the unwanted distinction of being the club that gave up the largest first-place lead since division play was introduced in 1969. They collapsed in full by losing the last game of that 78 season to the New York Yankees after having at one point a 14-game advantage. Now, unlike those 78 Sox, the Tigers can cede the division to Cleveland, even while breaking the Red Sox record for blowing the largest ever divisional lead, and still make the playoffs thanks to the wild card that did not exist in the late 1970s. That'll all depend largely on what the Houston Astros do over the last few games of the regular season, because after a loss Wednesday to the A's, Houston was the odd team out, 1 game behind Detroit for the final available wild card berth. It's hard to tell if it's good or bad for the Red Sox to be playing the Tigers to close out the season. Detroit is reeling, having lost 8 in a row as of Wednesday, and clearly their confidence has been rocked by their own poor play and Cleveland's amazing surge to overtake them. But they also have a lot more to be playing for over these last 3 games, desperate not to miss the playoffs entirely. Had they played just .500 baseball over the last month, they would be cruising into the postseason and likely not even starting their best players against Boston, but that is very much not the scenario for Detroit now. Meanwhile, it's worth noting that the Seattle Mariners, the only major league club never to play in a World Series, is looking very much like a contender this year, with a hold on first place in the AL West, and they also have superstar catcher Cal Raleigh, whose dad grew up in Swanton, by the way. Cal is now a member of the single-season 60 home run club, joining Babe Ruth, Roger Maris, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and Aaron Judge for that honor with his 60th round-tripper hit earlier this week. The WNBA playoffs are proving to be a thrill ride as well, especially the semifinal series between the defending champion Minnesota Lynx and Phoenix Mercury. Phoenix tied the best-of-5 series at a game apiece after a gritty and record-breaking come-from-behind 89-83 overtime win on Tuesday. The Lynx had never lost a playoff game in which they led at halftime by double digits, as they did in Game 2, but the Mercury kept clawing back in the second half, and they tied the game with 4 seconds left on a bucket by Sammy Whitcomb before finishing off the win in overtime. Game 3 is tonight in Phoenix, and the other series between the Las Vegas Aces and Indiana Fever is also knotted up at 1-1, with Game 3 set for tonight in Indianapolis. The Fever are trying for an upset in that one, playing without their injured superstar, Caitlin Clark. To football, and the New England Patriots will try to pick up their second win of the fledgling season when they host the Carolina Panthers this Sunday at Foxborough. Hanging on to the football would help in that effort. The Pats could easily be 2-1 at this point on the season instead of 1-2 had they not committed 5 turnovers against the Pittsburgh Steelers last week, a game New England lost despite outgaining Pittsburgh by more than 160 yards. And finally, this Saturday, the UVM men's soccer team hopes to keep their undefeated record intact when they host UMBC at Virtue Field. The Catamounts are 6-0-3 on the season after a recent 4-2 win over Fairfield, and the UVM women hope to improve on their 2-3-4 record when they host UNH on Sunday. And that's our weekly look at news from the world of sports. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. We had additional reporting from Bob Kinzel, Jen Jarecki, Abigail Giles, and Nathaniel Wilson. Today's episode was edited by Stephanie Colombini, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Wertlieb, and I'll talk to you Monday.